guys, and last year we paid out. We charge our farmers $22 an acre for their water. Last year we paid out $104 per acre through the water sharing agreements.
Wow.
And it was a good year last year. They didn't even notice that we leased any water. And so that can happen from time to time, but but the main thing was the infrastructure, but our farmers already are used to a short year and then a long year and a short year, so they do this rotational fallowing just naturally. And so if they actually take some of our water, they're gonna not irrigate their alfalfa the third cutting or the second and the third cutting, or they're gonna not plant the corners of their center pivot or whatever it may be, because we know ahead of time how much water somebody's gonna be using.
I just want to make a point that Jim made, and I wanted to show you. And this is really important as part of your water learning. Whenever you're talking about municipal water and ag water, it's really important to understand where is the municipal water treatment plant. It gets overlooked a lot. So across Colorado, all the way down to Colorado Springs, the municipal water treatment plants are right where the foothills touch the plains. They are here. There's 2 at Carver Lake. There's 3 at Horseshoe Reservoir. They're basically right along this line, right? And they access water sources that can get to the municipal water treatment plants. And so a lot of the water that's serving these irrigated lands here, you have to run exchanges to get that water up to the treatment plants, especially in the Poudre Basin. I can talk all day long about this. But it's exactly what Jim said, like these water sharing agreements work for the municipalities if you can get water to the treatment plants, which fall right on this like toe of the mountains here. That's the best quality water. Yeah. And that's why they put those treatment plants there. That and the CBT system is these 2 reservoirs. But that's why, and so, it doesn't work for the cities unless you get the water physically to the treatment plant. And then, to your question of how are these things approved, if it's a permanent change to the water rates, it will go through water court, just as any other permanent change to the water rate. There was created and there was motivation to create an opportunity to do 10, 20, and 30-year agreements under this fashion, where it's state engineer administrative approval. That's in place, you can do it. But that's the distinction, is if you're talking 10, 20, and 30 years, there's a state engineer administrative approval avenue. It still has opposition. You'll still have terms and conditions. It'll still take you 2 years. But if you do any sort of permanent change to a water rate, it will go through water court. Yeah.
All right. Well,
yeah.
Thank you, Brad. I think we got to wrap up and get our lunches, but thanks. So we are going to grab lunch, and we'll have Emily Hunt from Thornton start speaking at about 12:15. So get lunch, come back, talk with folks. So, following nicely from our previous conversations, we have Emily Hunt. She is the Deputy Utilities Director of the City of Thornton. And she has over 25 years of experience in Colorado water resource issues. She participated in the Colorado Foundation for Water Education's Water Leader program in 2006. Currently serves on the board of directors for Colorado Water Congress and the Metro Roundtable. She has a bachelor's degree in geology from UC Boulder and a master's degree in geography from University of Denver. And she also enjoys growing things, especially spicy outside. So let's hear it for Emily. Thank you for coming. I'm gonna sit somewhere else so I'm not in front of you.
Here we go.
All right.
Okay.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. Really nice to be here. I really appreciate the invitation to this program. I think I've come for the past few years. And I just also really want to thank you and compliment you on your commitment to learning about water. And this is really one of the best programs I think we can in the state to get people engaged with just a ton of issues. And it really does kind of take the long commitment and deep dive. So I'm very appreciative of it, and I'm appreciative of the program being offered in the first place. So what I'm here to talk to you a bit about is Thornton, our Northern Property Stewardship Plan specifically, but I want to give you a little bit of context as to why I'm even up here and Thornton is even up here in these parts. So I'll give you a little bit of background, and this is what I plan to go through. I think I have till 1, but I'll try to save some time for questions, and also feel free to just kind of interrupt me as we go. This is not particularly formally scripted, so I'm happy to answer questions as they come up. But I did want to just talk a little bit about just municipal water supply planning in general. It sounds like you guys actually covered some of that last session, so I can probably go through that pretty quickly. And give you a little bit of history about Thornton's water supply, the historical context of how we developed it, and like I said, why I'm even up here in Northern Colorado in the first place. Talk to you about our Thornton Northern project. Really get into the stewardship plan, which is kind of the agricultural transfer and the implications of that. And then also, everybody always asks me what's happening with the Thornton Water Project, so I can actually talk about it. So I'll talk about it. So anyway, just a real quick primer on municipal water supply planning in Colorado specifically. You know, the biggest piece of it is water efficiency and demand management. That's the very first thing that municipal water planners, at least most of them hopefully, are now looking at is how are our customers using water? Are we using it in the most wise way? Do we have a handle on how we can actually manage that demand in real, in an average year as well as in a drought year? In order to develop our portfolio, we try to acquire a bunch of different water rights. I know you just heard from Brett Bobby, so he's probably give you some good information about how water rights were acquired for municipal purposes. Diverse water rights means geographically diverse in a lot of instances. It also means diverse in terms of type of water, senior versus junior water. Storage is obviously critically important here in Colorado because our summer demands are up here. Our biggest reservoir comes in the winter in the form of snowpack. So we have to manage all of these different kind of timing issues with the timing of supply and the timing of demand through storage. Jim probably talked. Did you talk about storage? And then all of this put together is firm yield, which is essentially what a water portfolio, what a city or a water utility can count on in a time of sustained drought. So we try to build our portfolio around this concept of firm yield to make sure that we can meet these really critical health and human safety needs through a drought. Kind of what goes into that source of supply here in Colorado, we've got water rights, whether they're surface water rights in a lot of instances, wells, some people just have contracts with other water providers. There's the raw water infrastructure portion of that. We have to get that raw water closer to the place of demand. And then once you get it to that place, you have to treat that water to meet, federal standards and state standards, and then you have to send it right back out to to your system and to your community. So that's the treatment and distribution piece. And then, as I mentioned, the demand management, which comes in the form of metering at each water user as well as water efficiency. So these are just kind of the pieces of those municipal supply. Sure, you've seen this diagram 17,000 times at this point in time, but the dilemma in Colorado really is that all of our water is typically not where the highest demands are. And so you can see that on this graphic, both in the terms of east slope, west slope issues, but even just on the front range. Thornton, for example, we really don't have a very significant portion of our supply that comes from the west slope at all. We're not Denver Water, we're not Aurora. Most of our water is here in the South Platte Basin. And even with that, we're still not near the source of supply. So that's kind of the big dilemma, is that we have our demands in locations where we don't necessarily have the supply. I talked a little bit about the variability and why storage is so important, but this shows you, this is a snowpack graph. You've probably seen this as well, just in the South Platte Basin. The vertical axis shows you snow water equivalent, which is basically how much water is in an inch of snow. And you can see from this graphic that, anywhere from 7 inches of water on our lowest years, all the way up to 27 inches of water in our snowpack. So that's a huge amount of variability that we see year to year in our snowpack. So that's kind of the first piece that we're dealing with, is just how much water does Mother Nature give us every single year. Oops. And then the other piece of variability is obviously seasonal variability. Like, our high demand season is in the summertime when folks are irrigating their lawns, that sort of thing. So even within the municipal system, we've got variability. So just a really quick overview of how water utilities, municipal water providers go about planning for their supply and the sorts of things that we try to incorporate in that planning. So I'm going to talk a bit about Thornton now. We're a relatively new community. We're just located maybe 10 miles or so north of the city of Denver along I-25, and we're really kind of a post-Korean War community. There was a small development built just north of Denver that was put in place just after the Korean War, kind of a small suburb. At the point in time, that community was served by a small utility called Northwest Utilities that was really reliant primarily on groundwater sources in the South Platte Basin, or really just adjacent to Thornton. We also had some surface supplies in both Clear Creek and the South Platte. So we are kind of nestled near that confluence of Clear Creek and the South Platte. The city began to grow. We acquired Northwest Utilities, obviously needed to expand the water portfolio. We continued to develop our local supplies. So continued to develop Clear Creek supplies through purchasing water that was transitioning out of ag into municipal uses, mainly because of a lot of development was occurring over that ag land. Same thing with South Platte. We acquired some surface water supplies in the South Platte system and really, tried to match that out. Those are two very competitive over appropriated systems. So Clear Creek is maxed out. It's Thornton, Westminster, Northland, Coors Brewing, Public Service. Those are kind of the big users on Clear Creek, and there's just not any more water left up there. Same thing kind of around the South Platte. So we really tried to develop those local supplies. We actually purchased some water rights up in South Park, up in the high area of the South Platte Basin. And we were also a very big investor in Two Forks Reservoir. Who knows anything about Two Forks? Okay, so what's that? You lived in Evergreen? Okay. So Two Forks was a reservoir, massive reservoir, planned by Denver Water. And there were a lot of other partners in Two Forks. Thornton was actually the second, behind Denver Water, we were the next largest kind of interest in Two Forks. And this was really designed to be the water supply for the metro area moving into the future. It was kind of everybody's plan that was invested in Two Forks, that this would help meet the water supply needs for the future in the whole Front Range. Two Forks came on right as the environmental movement really was picking up steam. There was a very significant kind of anti-dam sentiment. Folks were getting really sick of all of the big on-stream reservoirs that were being constructed all along the Colorado River Basin. And so Thornton really saw the writing on the wall and was like, we don't think this is gonna happen. And so we actually divested ourselves from Two Forks. We sold our interest to the South Metro area. And took it upon ourselves at that time to go find our own independent supply that could meet our future needs. So sure enough, Two Forks was vetoed by the EPA. In my opinion, I've heard this shared by others in the water community, the demise of Two Forks caused a couple of things. One, it really caused all of the water providers like Thornton to scatter and to kind of become little, okay, we can't rely on some big project, we need to develop our own supply. So it really caused a lot of the fragmentation that you see in water development along the Front Range, for good or bad, just did. And then it also really chased ag. It really was the impetus, in my opinion, to put pressure on ag, and people started going out to purchase ag water rights in pretty big chunks in order for their future supply. So I really see it as a kind of a pivotal change for our region and how water supplies began to develop. And it's really exactly why Thornton ended up with interest in the Cache-la-Poudre River Basin, is when we bailed on Two Forks, we wanted to look for a very reliable supply that we could grow into. We were looking for, mentioned geographic diversity, how important that was. So Clear Creek, South Platte, Poudre, all very different, kind of systems. You can have a drought in one of those basins one year, and in that same year, another basin is performing really well. So the geographic diversity was really important to us. The other really critical part for Thornton is water quality. We are downstream from the Denver metro area, and our entire South Platte supply is below urban runoff. And we've got currently significant issues with PFAS. We've always had water quality challenges on the South Platte Basin, river supply, as well as our lower Clear Creek. And so we were really looking for a high quality water source that we could serve our customers with. We're required to meet Safe Drinking Water Act standards, but most utilities go for that highest quality source of supply because it minimizes public risk and it minimizes the need for treatment, energy consumption, chemicals, all of that sort of thing. So that's kind of our little history. The supply we landed on is the Water Supply and Storage Company system. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with that, but it's a really amazing, robust ditch system. It's a ditch company that's up here locally. It has native Poudre supplies, which means water rights that are coming straight off the Poudre River, but it also has Trans Mountain water that comes over into Grand River ditches, as well as some other components of it. Really nice high reservoir storage in the form of Chambers Lake and Long Jaw Reservoir. Also a lot of storage out here on the plains. So just, it's really a pretty remarkable system. So what you see here on this map, the dark blue, I can't tell you.
Doesn't work on
Okay.
Yeah.
Use your finger.
I'll use my finger. Here's the river down here. The dark blue is the Laramie County Canal, which is the main ditch of the Water Supply and Storage Company system. You'll see reservoirs scattered throughout. The ones in pink are the ones that are owned by the Water Supply and Storage Company system. Out here, the system breaks out into a bunch of laterals that irrigate the farmland under that system. And all of these kind of grayish, bluish polygons that you see are properties that Thornton purchased in the mid-80s, along with the shares of Water Supply and Storage Company that were used to irrigate these properties. So we own just under half of all of the shares in the Water Supply and Storage Company system, as well as about half of the acreage under that system that has been historically irrigated. So we are a very significant shareholder in the system and water user in the basin. So these properties were acquired in the 80s. kind of a little bit of a history, spent a couple of years acquiring them. That's a story that is an interesting saga that I won't talk about today. Beginning in '85, when we first purchased our first property, we got staff from Thornton that were up here locally. We had a stewardship office or a farm management office since the '80s in all Colorado. It kind of helps manage all these properties, so we've been up there doing that. We spent 12 years in water court. Giant water court case, went to the Supreme Court, got a ruling back from the Supreme Court, final decree from the water court in 1998, so after 12 years. Anybody that studies law studies Thornton v. Bijou. It's kind of, it's like, it's a little bit of a Bible for water rights in Colorado, I think. So it was really a legacy case. It also really set the stage for kind of modern agricultural to municipal transfers. There were some transfers that were done in other parts of the state just ahead of ours that really were quite destructive to local communities. There weren't requirements about long-term land stewardship in those transfers. And so when our case went to court, a lot of the water community had those previous transfers in their mind. And so we have come out with a decree that's about 4 inches thick. And it has, in my opinion, very protective terms and conditions, not just for the river, which you would expect from a water court case, but also for the lands and what Thornton has to do in order to manage these lands so that we don't cause dust bowls and so that we don't decimate communities and that sort of thing. So our decree is pretty strict. There are more strict ones that have come out since, but I do think it's quite protective. In 2014, we started what we call the Thornton Northern Project, the big water supply project. We call the Thornton Water Project the pipeline. So you kind of hear those, people might use them interchangeably, but the water project is simply the pipeline necessary to move the water from the Larimer County Canal or the West system to Thornton. Everything else, kind of the farmland, everything is the Thornton Northern Project. So all of that, sorry for my 10-minute runway here, to get you to the stewardship plan. So as I mentioned, our water court decree kind of governs certain things that we have to do with the property. It tells us that we have to, when we remove that water from irrigation, in order to put it in the pipeline to deliver it to Thornton, what happens to that land, right? It's been irrigated for over 100 years. Our water court decree tells us that we have to convert it into some sort of non-irrigated, self-sustaining use. That can be dryland farming, it can be native grasses or dryland grasses. It can actually be development in some instances too. It just can't be irrigated anymore. And we can't just walk away and leave a formerly irrigated field to nature's course. So that's a requirement under our decree, but what we've learned after being up here for 30 plus years is that what we do with our properties has a really big impact on the local communities. It has a huge impact, obviously, on our farmers, who are our biggest partners in all of this. They're our property managers. And what we wanted to try to find was, is there a way that we can manage our properties and then manage our properties, meet the terms of our decree, which we absolutely have to do, but also try to work with communities and other interests to maybe meet some community objectives. Probably the best example is our properties surround the entire town of Alta. And we've heard a lot from the town of Alta that, hey, you're restricting our ability to grow. Nobody wants to come here because you won't own the land and they don't think you're going to sell it to us. So that was kind of a very, we see lots of issues like that throughout our properties. And so we kind of thought, well, what if there's a way that we could understand what the objectives are of these communities and we could time our management, our dry up of the lands as well as our management of the lands to try to meet all of these objectives. So that's what the stewardship plan is. Totally voluntary, really community driven. One of the biggest things that we didn't want to do too is we don't want to come up here and be like, here, Thornton's master planning your community for you, So it really had to be kind of local input to us to help inform how we want to manage our properties. But we still have to meet these water demands, right? We still have to meet the needs that we have for the original acquisition. So just kind of again, a recap of the properties. This is, let's see, this is all right there. So you can see all of our blue properties just surrounding them. We've got some out here in in Larimer County. This is the 85 corridors, and so there's obviously a lot of kind of growth pressure going on there too. So there's a lot of potential tension out there with how we manage our properties and how these communities get to grow the way that they might want to grow. We got some great funding partners in this. It's a really exciting project. When we started kicking it off, folks were really interested in it. We got a water smart grant from Bureau of Rec. Obviously, Thornton's paying part of the funding. Water Conservation Board really stepped in and gave us quite a bit of funding through all of the different water plan grants. We also got DOLA, some money from them. And again, we wanted to get some outside funding once again so that it didn't seem like Thornton was completely controlling this process, right? We have to be accountable to these funding agencies in order to report out what this study showed. Community-driven process that we spent, I guess, about over 3 years on. So this is kind of a snapshot of everything that we went through in our stewardship planning process. We started with some subject matter expert interviews. We pulled together a steering committee. I'll show you who was on that in the next slide, that essentially committed 24 months of their life to us to meet with us over the course of 2 years to help us study this problem and really guide the document. We also went out, met with the individual communities. I remember having one of these meetings up at Severance, actually, and then had some community open houses, that sort of thing. So lots and lots and lots and lots of community input. Here's our steering committee members. We really tried to get folks that have local expertise, subject matter expertise in terms of, irrigation, other ag opportunities, conservation. A lot of these properties, we have a whole slew of properties that butt up to the Condon National Grasslands. So there's a lot of different opportunities out here. We wanted to bring this whole group together just to bring their expertise, but also to kind of bring that creative thinking about how there might be some overlap in meeting multiple objectives. And one of the things that we learned early on in those subject matter expert interviews, as well as kind of in the initial steering committees, is we really had these big calls to action. Ag in this area is hugely important, not just historically, but into the future. And how do we really maintain and try to help support that strong regional agricultural heritage? Ag is transitioning as much as it might be convenient to say that the biggest pressure on ag is, Thornton or Parker or some municipality. There are a lot of pressures on ag outside of the water. And so how do we kind of help, manage some of those pressures? How could Thornton actually be a stabilizing influence because of our ownership and our stability up there as all of these pressures come through? The areas are also very reliant on ag. How can we support some additional economic diversification as growth happens? And so those are some objectives. There's a lot of people coming. They just keep coming. And then in Colorado, strangely, we're not great at planning water and land use in the same breath. Yet, right? We're getting there because of efforts like this. I think it's really helpful. And, in Weld County and specifically, there isn't a very strong appetite for regional planning. It's a very kind of like property owner centric approach. Like, no, let people do what they will do and let other forces drive it. And so it was a bit of a challenge to kind of bring that thinking together. But, as a local public entity, we're not a typical private landowner, right? And so we could possibly help kind of facilitate this regional approach, regional visioning to the extent that the area wants it. So two big pieces of the stewardship plan. The first is this land use assessment, which is, who are planners in here? You mean planners? Oh, yeah. You are gonna nerd out on this. So this big planning process, which was just so eye-opening to me. And the second piece is this is really where I nerd out, and it's this water optimization concept. Thornton has a really interesting term in our decree that actually allows us to re-irrigate the lands with non-Thornton water. So it's not an ATM, it's not an alternative transfer mechanism, but if we can find other water, we can keep those those lands in irrigation and still have our water supply needs met. So it's kind of a unique provision in the decree, and we really wanted to try to take advantage of it to see if we can help kind of prolong really high producing viable ag. This will make your head, it makes my head explode. What this map is everybody's comp plan on one map. To the extent our planners could get all the terminology right. I'll give you the highlights. The yellow is kind of like medium density residential. People think that's what's going to happen in those areas. This light green is ag, continued ag. Red is industrial. No offense to Fort Collins, but you know, there's a lot going on here, and we don't have any property down here, so just kind of, it's very busy. But what we really wanted out of this land use analysis in this map is Thornton's properties are in pink. How do our properties overlap with this land use? And are there areas of tension? Are there areas of, you know, kind of no-brainers, right? Like, yeah, that's clearly what our property should be used of in the future. And so a lot of those regional working groups, we did this kind of mapping exercise, and then we went out, met with Severance, and said, is this really what's going on? You guys really planning this, you know, and kind of did some tweaking and that sort of thing. The real eye-opener for me with this whole process was, and maybe this is because I'm Pollyanna and just like an eternal optimist, there's not a ton of a lot of our property isn't in a lot of conflict, if that makes sense. Do you know what I mean? We had a lot more in ag, continued irrigated ag, than I thought we would. And you know, I kind of thought we'd see a lot of conflicts, I guess is what I'm saying. So that was kind of surprising to me. The water optimization study, I'm just kind of giving you little highlights of it. Again, this is the concept of us, can we try to keep irrigated ag in production as long as possible? Also, are there areas where we should prioritize irrigated ag over maybe not so much? So within the WISC system, there's some properties that maybe are really difficult to irrigate. So should those be the ones that we kind of prioritize taking out of irrigation first, where some really high producing irrigated properties, maybe we try to keep those in irrigation as long as possible. What this map is showing you is that Thornton is not the only game in town. This is the WISC system. You can kind of see the ditches, and all of the colors, the pink are properties that Thornton.
Is that pink or purple?
Lavender.
I'm not colorblind, I'm color dumb.
Yeah,
That's the one. Okay, thank you.
Okay, you got it.
I'm just trying to wake everybody up to understand.
So lavender is
Lavender, okay, thank you.
yellow is other municipalities that own water supply and storage company shares, other water providers. So you're talking about City of Greeley, City of Fort Collins, the tri-districts. So, you know, granted, we're the biggest one out there, but there's a lot of action going on in WISC, and there will continue to be. The green ones or whatever, what is that, olive? I don't know. Olive tea? Those are properties that Thornton owns, but that have already been converted to some sort of dry land, native grasses or something like that. So, you know, how can we all work within the WISC system to try to keep ag viable? Because this really represents about 75% of the system, which means 25% is going to stay in ag. This is a gigantic system, and that is really difficult to try to move 25% of the water out to continued ag when all of these folks like us are taking water out of the system. So we need to work with the other municipal interests as well as water supply. This is kind of an interesting map around so what the optimization study group did is looked at kind of data like this, and this is soils. And oversimplifying, green soil is good, red soil is bad. So you can kind of see how soils in the WISC system shake out. And the areas in green are really high, nice soils. And so should we prioritize those areas for continued ag and maybe dry up the red ones faster? This is just one piece of data. There was multiple things that the optimization study group looked at to try to come with some recommendations. So we're done with these studies. We're done with the land use analysis. We're done with the optimization study. The steering committee has gotten together and we have some recommendations. We've got properties that have really high conservation values. And in a lot of instances, that's what the community wants to see as well. And so now each property, this is oversimplifying it, but each property kind of has a potential destiny once Thornton removes it from irrigated ag. And that destiny, or vision, I should say, has been more or less informed by, well, it has definitely been informed by the community, and there's relatively decent alignment on it. There are definitely some areas, I'm looking at, who's Windsor? Who's here from Windsor? Oh, Chanel. I'm looking at you, Windsor. No, I'm kidding. There are definitely some areas where there is tension, right? Where there is multiple different, oh, that'd be great development. Oh, no, we want it as open space. Oh, no, we want it, so, but at least this process has allowed us to identify those areas of tension so that our city council doesn't just go blindly making one singular decision and not really understanding the unintended consequences of it. But for the most part, I think we have a pretty decent idea. And we've got this kind of steering committee together and this process now so that we can keep this study kind of alive and updated as we move along. So we completed the analysis. We had to send reports to our granting agencies, which we just did at the end of the month, or end of the year, I should say. We took the preliminary report to our council. Council, it's always we have to keep them in the loop. They're the decision makers. And so we really want to make sure that they continue to buy into this effort because, if Thornton, and this could happen, Thornton could choose to just highest and best for Thornton. That's it. That's our measure. That's what we're looking at for decisions. And what this process does is really say, no, let's look at a much bigger framework around this decision. And so we really, at the staff level and at the management level, want to keep that kind of vision and ethic alive.
How much of that is governed by the decree, however?
A lot of it is governed by the decree.
So you can say, pound sand, we're gonna do best for Thornton, but your decree won't.
If we want our water, we have to follow the decree. Yeah, very true. And so right now we're kind of putting the bow on the plan where the next piece is creating kind of a little bit of a decision-making matrix that we can present to our council so that they know how we are going to be coming to them with these decisions. And we'll talk to them about that at the, probably in this first quarter. We are not planning on being particularly proactive about this, right? We're not going to go put 17,000 acres on the MLS. We have some really exciting opportunities that we want to explore. One with the town of All, one with a school district up there who wants to use one of our properties for a school site. So obviously Larimer County and the city of Fort Collins have some real interest in a lot of our Larimer County properties for open space. So there are hopefully some early wins that we can get out of this. But I really anticipate that this is going to be very much like, we're going to see what's coming to us. Like what is the region, what is a developer seeing out there, or a business developer, and then they can come to us and say, hey, we want to buy this land. We get those kinds of inquiries all the time, and we've always just said, sorry, we're not for sale. This gives us a chance to kind of run it through this framework and say, is this an opportunity that Thornton should consider for Thornton? Is this also an opportunity that is in alignment with this plan? And we think the local communities also might want to see it as well. So this really just gives us that framework to walk it through and hopefully make some, win-win-win-win-win type decisions. So I'm super excited about it. Now to get to something more difficult. I might pause there. Just ask really quick.
I'm sorry if you asked or said this already, but why did you choose the ditch system?
Yeah, so Water Supply and Storage Company system it's an amazing system. Has really good senior Poudre River rights. It has Trans Mountain rights from the Colorado River Basin that are actually pre-compact, which means they're not subject to the Colorado River compact. It has high mountain storage as well as storage on the plains. And it was also available at the time. The mid-'80s was rough.
Ag crisis, farmers were going
Crisis.
bankrupt.
So we were Thornton's purchase helped keep a lot of farmers afloat. We actually leased to a lot of those same farmers. And so again, that's kind of where the stability comes in. It's like, is there a way that we can create some stability? So those are the main reasons.
Do you have a ballpark of how much was spent in the 80s?
I wanted what comes to mind is like $57 million. Peanuts in today's market. So I know most people are curious about the water project. So I'll give you an update on that. This is the pipeline. So we call it the Thornton Water Project, the pipeline that is gonna move water from, this is the Water Supply and Storage Company system way up there. That's Water Supply and Storage Company reservoirs 3 and 4. If you're familiar with the area. So Fort Collins is here, Thornton is here. So our pipeline moves water out of the Water Supply and Storage Company reservoir system east and then due south to Thornton. It's around 70 miles of pipeline. We want to pull the water out here for water quality reasons. This is high in the system. It's above all of the wastewater discharges in the Poudre River, which there are several. It's above stormwater runoff that happens as it goes through the city of Fort Collins. So where we're at on the project is we have 60 miles of pipeline really in some stage of either construction, design, all of the easement acquisitions have been acquired, all of the approvals that we need from the various jurisdictions, except maybe Johnstown. Getting there. But so we've been through the approvals that we need. We have actually 7 miles of pipeline already complete, actually through part of Johnstown that has now been around for several years. At the end of last year, we went out to bid for this big segment that's just north of Thornton. Got really good construction pricing back, so that's what's been scary too. Segment A is out to bid right now. This is the Thornton segment. Segment C will go out to bid shortly as well. So later this year, we're going to have construction in 3 really significant segments, all north of Thornton. Segment E, we're pretty much designed, but we're waiting to put the final design on it because we need to know where we're going to tie in segment F. And segment F is the Larimer County section. It's this 10-mile section here. We applied for
It's not political, is it?
No. It's just a pipeline. It's just plumbing. Yeah, so we went to Larimer County Commissioners in we've been working with the county since 2014. I think we officially filed that application in 2017. We were told to pound sand, spent some time in court. We filed an appeal on their decision. Went to the appellate court. We decided not to appeal it to the Supreme Court. The appellate court and the district court did uphold the decision, but also gave some really good guidance about what and how Larimer County should apply its 1041 regulations. While we were in court, Larimer County put a moratorium on 1041s and revised their regulations and went from 12 criteria to 37. Those criteria are out. There have been, since our denial, 2 pipeline applications that have been approved. NISP was approved under their previous regs, and Newt, which is East Larimer County, Northwell. They have almost an identical pipeline to ours that was approved under these new regs. The difference is that they're just treated, ours is not, and they live in your community. So that's
I thought that was a part of the SMART process.
What's that?
I thought they got approved for the SMART process.
I'm not sure about that, smart process,
SPAR,
SPAR, oh.
prior to the 1041.
No, I think they actually had to go into a moratorium. They had to hold their project up when the moratorium was on, and then they went through the new regs, but we'll definitely look into that.
Well, Emily, if I can call out, I mean, you made it sound like Larimer might be Weld County denied it too.
Weld County denied the application.
But Thornton found a loophole in our regs
Yeah.
to basically go behind, I don't want to make it, but behind the decision of what the county commissioners did.
Yep.
Some loophole in the code, which I think I'm a Weld County, so I think we have now
Oh, close.
closed that loophole.
So there is, and 1041 is exempt from that part of this. It's actually part of state statute that allows a local jurisdiction, as long as they go through the process of a different jurisdiction, they can actually overrule that denial if it's been made. And that is what Thornton did. We did, however, do that in conjunction with the commissioners, and also agreed to all of the terms and conditions that we had in the original permit. So, but yeah, thank you for making that distinction. It has not been a smooth road at all. In the meantime, though, we have been working great.
Especially look how much is in Weld County, I mean,
Yeah.
there's a ton.
And then the second D, like that, those we did first because they were annexed, they were not under Weld County's jurisdiction, they were under other local jurisdiction. But we've actually been working really well with Weld County on the construction piece of it. But yeah, that was contentious as well. So we filed our 1041 with the county last November. It's currently in what's called a completeness review right now. So they've got 60 days to look at our application to determine whether or not it's complete. I think we should hear at the beginning of February whether the staff deems it complete, and at that point in time, they also set our application for hearing with both the Planning Commission as well as the Board of County Commissioners. You know, I was involved a little bit in the project on the first go around, and I am knee deep in it this time. And I really do think we've gone at this a different way. Last time we designed the project first, it was an engineering project, kind of took this approach of, you know, these regulations, not quite that bad, but you know, we definitely took an engineering approach to it. And to your point, this is not an engineering problem, this is a community political problem. And so this time around, we spent this whole year doing community outreach with not just where we think the pipeline would go, but the broader community. We know there's a lot of folks that just are against the project philosophically, but we've also been able to talk to people that, you know, really just want some of their values respected and met and appreciated. And so we took that community input first and then designed our alignment around it second. And I think I'm hopeful that the commissioners will be glad to hear that. This is the alignment, essentially. The blue is Thornton's current alignment. The yellow is what we applied for last time that was denied. And black is Northern's misalignment. And so one of the things that we've done is we've co-located with Northern for a big piece of it. That's something that we heard from the county as well as the community that they wanted us to do. The biggest change, in my opinion, is before our pump station was right here, and we wanted our pipeline to go, you know, through this neighborhood, beautiful homes, beautiful reservoir property, really not popular. We relocated our pump station all the way up here on Wisp property. We lose some yield by doing that, but we're not in anybody's view shed or backyard. We're 2,000 feet from the closest residence. And so that was a huge change in our alignment. A lot of it's staying the same, and then we co-locate down with NISP. So here are some kind of takeaways about the current application. In that alignment, it's 22 properties that we impact, which is significantly fewer than last time. And actually 16 of those properties are kind of privately held, if that makes sense. We own 2 of them, WISC owns some, the state land board owns some, an HOA owns some. And I've actually been able to have one-on-one meetings with all but 3 of those people. So that's something that we really tried to work on as well. So I'm over it.
One or two questions?
Yeah, I got a question for you, Emily. So, I'm really happy personally to see the water optimization study. I think up in my area, which is Will County, you hear by and dry all the time, and you hear the anger around that and productive ground coming out of production. But I am, even with the water optimization study, you've done so much research. Have you guys done an economic analysis? If you take Thornton's main desire out of it and the benefit to you, if you even take away the stuff on your land use analysis with all the comp plans, there's still that bulk that remains in ag. Have you done an analysis about what the lost production or lost agricultural benefit to the state would be when those lands are not in ag production anymore?
We haven't, our study didn't do an analysis looking at it that way. That would be really interesting to do, for sure. It kind of, the economists that we worked at flipped it the other way to look at what was the potential demand, economic kind of potential outside of ag on all of the properties. And that's where it was kind of that map that I showed that showed so much of our property still in ag. That's kind of the result of that study, because it really showed that the highest value is likely continued ag, maybe not necessarily irrigated. And so I like your thought, though. That might be something that we look at as we move forward.
So this, you blink and it'll be 40 years of doing this. Annually, what is this costing the city?
Oh, our management up there in
Yeah,
general?
just litigation.
Oh.
I mean, I'm sure it's peaks and valleys, but, or no valleys.
Yeah. Oh, gosh, I can't really. The property management piece of it is actually, the city subsidizes that operation a little bit, but not a lot. It's kind of a net, what we get from leases from our farmers helps support our 3 staff members that we have up there and all. So that operation is, the city does subsidize it, but it's not horribly, I don't know.
It's all right.
I'm like even trying to figure out what numbers I would pull together, but.
What will it do to water rates when it's up and running?
That's where I'm going with it, is that it's still, because someone asked about how much we bought this for and how much it's now worth. That is where it comes into play, is in the water. It's not so much water rate equation, but the connection fee equation. How much are we gonna charge developers to buy into this system and these assets that we've acquired? And that is a balance that we're constantly recalculating every year. And at this point, we're still, there is still reason to continue to pursue this water supply for the future need of Thornton. So it's a very weird way to.
The market will tell you.
Yes. Is the Two Forks out of the question now?
There's still a Two Forks water right?
It's done.
Okay.
This is very naive and simplistic, actually, but for all the money you have spent for this project over the years, and the legal fees and just a headache, can't you just go buy water from Denver that seems to have no?
Denver has some very interesting rules on who they can actually sell water to, first of all. When Thornton originally did its own system, it was because Denver Water told us no. So, and then we would just pull more water.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you, I'm sorry.
Okay.
We'll see you. Rest friendship.
All right, so it brings up our last speaker of the day, and please take the whole time that you. Jessica Thrasher, she is our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Program Lead at the Water Center. She's last year, very, very happy to have her on our team. She has a bachelor's degree in sociology from Southern Methodist University and a master's degree in international development anthropology from Colorado State University. She focuses on creating and managing programs that promote a diverse water workforce representative of the communities served, equitable access to water resources and information, and developing resources that promote integration of DEI practices into the water field. And she's going to be talking a bit about some of those approaches in general DEI today and how you all might be able to integrate some practices in your own work. So thank you, Jessica, for coming.
Thank you so much, Karen. It's really nice to see some familiar faces, and I look forward to connecting with you all more after this. This is a picture that I took, and it really, I love water. I'm a water nerd, as Emily was saying. I love water. It brings people together, but it also can cause conflict. And so I'm here today to talk about how we can broaden our conversation and make sure that all the people who need to be in the room are in the room.
So it's fine. You have to tap the screen somewhere. There, might work.
Okay, thank you. So we're going to start today. Here's my agenda for my talk. We're going to start with the CSU land acknowledgement and what has already been said today. Thank you. Then talk a little bit more about the Colorado Water Center DEI program. It is new. Water equity, what are the definitions around that? What does that mean? Equitable access to information, how that is possible, diverse water workforce, inclusion, and finally resources. I'm an educator and I love resources. So I'm going to just read the CSU land acknowledgement. Colorado State University acknowledges with respect that the land we are on today is the traditional and ancestral homelands of the Arapaho, Cheyenne, and Ute nations and peoples. This was also a site of trade, gathering, and healing for numerous other native tribes. We recognize the indigenous peoples as original stewards of this land and the relatives within it. As these words of acknowledgement are spoken and heard, the ties natives have to their traditional homelands are renewed and affirmed. CSU is founded as a land-grant institution, and we accept that our mission must encompass access to education and inclusion, and significantly that our founding came at a dire cost to Native nations and peoples whose land this university was built on. This acknowledgement is the education and inclusion we must practice in recognizing our institutional history, responsibility, and commitment. I think it's very important for us to recognize and realize that there were people who were here for us. There's a lot of ownership of water. This is my water, this is your water, but really it was none of our water. And so I think that additional kind of perspective really helps us to rethink how we view water. Instead of viewing it as a commodity, the way that a lot of tribal nations view water is something that we need to steward. It is our responsibility to protect water at the community level. And so at CSU, we acknowledge how tribes have been removed from these lands, but it's also a great reminder that tribes have also been left out of the water conversation a lot. And that we need to not just include them at the end of our projects, but they need to be integral to how we're talking about using and managing our water moving forward. So I'm sure you're familiar with the mission of the Colorado Water Center, but I just wanted to highlight our focus areas. We have three main focus areas: water workforce development, diversity, equity, and inclusion in water, and agricultural water management. Karen manages the Water Workforce Development Program, and I manage the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion in Water Program. And then Joel, who is just here, and Perry Cabot both work on the Agricultural Water Management. So the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Program is new, kind of to where it is now. We've had programs, and I'll be talking about that in a moment, the Water Fellows Program, which was existing prior to me starting at the Colorado Water Center. But really, we're building up this program. That was mainly just kind of one thing that we did, but now we're building an entire program, including diversity, equity, and inclusion. So these programs are promoting equitable access to water resources, diverse water workforce, integration of DEI practices into the water field, and then the Water Fellows Program. So before we talk about what do we need to do now, I think it's really important to orient us into what is the problem. So we have a clear understanding before we move into solutions. So I'm going to touch a little bit about environmental injustice. A lot of this work was taken, or a lot of these bullet points were taken from the Protégete Colorado Latino Climate Justice Policy Handbook. That is a lot of words. But this is some of the key points. We've done research and talked with communities about what are the key issues that are important to our communities, and they put it in this amazing handbook and report. That's a part of my resources page at the end, but also when you receive these PowerPoint presentations, all of these blue letterings are links that you can then learn more information about. So different community members have different access to environmental benefits. That includes green spaces, clean air, and clean water. I don't think it's any surprise to anyone for you to hear about heat, the heat island effect in the city and county of Denver. Neighborhoods that are hotter are low-income neighborhoods. There's less trees in these areas. There's less access to resources. Places in Commerce City have polluted soil. They're next to refineries. Their air is polluted and polluted water. I recently heard I guess it wasn't recently now, time, right? 2020, I don't even know what time it is anymore. It's 2024 and here we are. So I heard a presentation last year at the Colorado Water Congress, and it was someone from Commerce City. And she was talking to me about how, not me personally, she was talking to everyone on a panel about how genetic diseases, you know, when you fill out your forms at the doctor's office and they say, have your grandparents or parents or ever experienced these diseases? That now there's research being conducted because the diseases that we thought were genetic are actually environmental. That people who live generationally in these same spaces and are impacted by continual pollution in their air, soil, and water are having these particular symptoms and diseases that aren't actually genetic. And I had never even considered that possibility. That was, it really kind of shook my worldview to understand that there are people who are exhibiting kind of these impacts specifically. Something else that she shared is that in the schools in those areas, they're having to close down some schools because of enrollment, or they're having low enrollment in schools. I can't speak exactly to schools enrollment, but lower enrollment in schools because kids are sick all the time because of these same impacts. So something to think about in how we are, I guess, the importance of addressing these issues. Communities with less power, wealth, and privilege are more likely to live next to these polluted areas. Industrial zones where highways are placed, power plants, hazardous waste facilities, etc. Extreme climate events, people who are more vulnerable to flooding, heat, we just talked about heat island effect, are in these areas as well. So if you overlay, there are these mapping systems that I can't think of off the top of my head. I think EnviroScreen with CDPHE is one of these systems that you can look at, a GIS map of where communities who are more vulnerable to heat and climate, and overlay them with income. And you will see how those are very closely aligned. Mobile home parks are another really big issue. Something that a lot of people aren't aware of is that mobile home parks, the water usually that the municipalities are treating is to the tap at the beginning of the park. The mobile home park owner is responsible then from getting the water from the tap to the homes, and they're responsible for all of the plumbing underneath that. And a lot of community members in mobile home parks, those piping systems are clay. There's lead in them. They haven't been serviced in quite some time because the regulations for mobile home park owners have not been the same as it is for municipalities. And so there have been a lot of, I was talking to a student came to me and they live in a mobile home park in Fort Collins. And they told me they have raw sewage coming up in their bathtub, their water gets shut off without notice, and that the pressure for their water will change very quickly. They can't rely on their water. And this is something that struck me so profoundly to know that there are people in our community who don't have regular, safe access to water. That's something that I thought, oh, that's, developing world problem, and it is not. And so House Bill 22-1287 was recently approved or passed into law, which is holding mobile home park owners more accountable. There's also going to be a new mobile home park liaison that will be hired, either they're already hired or they will be hired, to really help elevate this issue and to make these areas safer for our residents and our community members. So what is water equity? That's something that I've been thinking a lot about, and there's a lot of different definitions. It isn't entirely clear that people have the same type of definitions of water equity. So the definition that I have been using is the U.S. Water Alliance definition of water equity. They have these 4 different pillars, which are listed here. The first pillar is around ensuring people have clean, safe, affordable drinking water and wastewater services. Underneath that is affordability, access to infrastructure, and water quality. The next piece is that when there's new infrastructure, Denver is doing their lead replacement program, so new infrastructure is being put in, who is benefiting from that infrastructure? So does the community share in the economic, social, and environmental benefits of the water system? So workforce development, contracting for new projects, and neighborhood revitalization. Also, Emily was talking about this, but communities having a role in the decision-making process for water management is a key part of water equity. And then resilience, climate resilience. Here we are in December. No, we're not in December in Florida, January. And there's no snow. It didn't snow in December. I think we can all feel the impacts of climate very profoundly in just kind of our day-to-day. But planning and assessment, funding, and project delivery. So what does this look like? Okay, we have a definition now, but what does this actually mean? The way that I will be just kind of framing a couple things today is equitable access to information. So we all need to be part of the water conversation. It impacts every single one of us. But a lot of the water education that's being provided to all of our community members is only available in English. So we need to think about how everyone needs to be involved, but not everyone has all the information. And so what a critical component that is to our outreach is making sure that people have access to the information. Because without access to the information, we can't take that next step of community engagement. A diverse water workforce, I'll be talking about, and then diverse representation. So in diverse representation, what I'm talking about now is really at our conferences, who are talking about these issues. What are their backgrounds? A lot of times I have heard from folks, we don't know who to ask that's kind of outside of our circle. So I've been sharing a lot this Color of Water by Water Hub. This is a directory of minority water experts. And you can sort it by topic area, you can sort it by region. And so this isn't an exhaustive list, they just are getting started. But even if you're like, here are some other people outside of the folks that I normally ask or normally talk to, and getting this different kind of perspective. So here I took these numbers from the census. And of the 5.6 million people in 2020, according to the census for the Colorado population, approximately 22% are Hispanic. I put that in quotes because there's a lot of terms around the Latino community. So I'm a member of the Latino community and want to talk briefly about that in a second. But there's 1.25 million people who identify as Hispanic, Latino, Latina, Latinx, and Chicano, and all the same. And then that is looking at over 600,000 households that speak Spanish in the household. And so this is a large percentage of the Colorado population. And so we're talking about who is being left out. There are more languages than just Spanish being spoken here in Colorado, obviously, but this is a big number of people who aren't receiving information. So briefly about the kind of names here. So when we're doing community engagement, in these communities. It's important to know that there are different things that people go by, the way people identify. And when you're working with these communities, it's important because maybe that's not how the community that you've reached out to does identify. And so if we're talking about trust building and working with communities that we haven't normally worked with or haven't normally been a part of this conversation, it's important to know how they want to be talked to and referred to and engaged. So Hispanic is a name that or a term that you'll see that really means pretty general. Any type of origin from a Spanish-speaking country is kind of the way that's sort of seen. Hispanic from the Latino community is sometimes seen as a negative term because what I was told is that some people from the Latino community view that as you're trying to be more white by saying you're Hispanic. You're trying to present yourself as a different identity. I grew up identifying as Hispanic. My mom is from Mexico and my dad is from Alabama, two totally different countries. And so anyway, I did identify as Hispanic, but now I identify as Latina. And Latina is a term that was created by the Latino community. And so I feel very much more connected to that. Chicano is a term that means you have one person you're one parent from Mexico and one parent from the United States. So I'm also a Chicana. My mom does not like that term because when she was growing up, it was used in a very derogatory way. After there was then a movement to reclaim the Chicano name and really empower it, having it be more of a empowerment and political kind of movement of equity. And so I identify as Latina and Chicana. And so, and then just to the, has anyone seen the E or the X? Have you heard of that? So Latin X is a term that's used a lot in like university spaces, I think. It's used sometimes other places too, but really heavily in the university. So Latin X is really to make the term more gender neutral because Spanish is very gendered. So it's either female or masculine terms and endings and all the things. So Latinx is a term that was used to try to be that more inclusive. Latinx is used more by younger generations and by, like I said, the university spaces. The older generations have no idea what that means. Like if you go into a community and it's a Latino community and they're from Mexico, they haven't even heard of that term. Additionally, the E, okay, so the X sound doesn't make any sense in Spanish. It just doesn't sound that way. So you would say Latina and then Latinx. It just doesn't make any sense in Spanish. So the way that in Spanish, the gender neutral kind of movement is more of an E. So it's Latine, Latina, or Latina, Latino, Latine. So anyway, I know there's lots of terms, but I just want to show you within my own community, there's all of these different terms. And I know it can be overwhelming to be like, well, what do I say? You know, but this is just more of an understanding to say, when you go into these communities, to say, I recognize that there are a lot of terms. How would you best like to be addressed? So to the point of different types of education and information. Interpretation and translation are two different skill sets. So translation is the translation of a written content from one language to the other. Words. Okay, so PowerPoint slides, materials, etc. Interpretation is when I'm talking in English and someone is next to me translating that into another language. When I was first kind of learning more about language interpretation and translation, I thought that if I was going to give this presentation to you, I would have to have someone here standing right next to me and I would say, welcome, and they would say, bienvenidos. And so the whole presentation would be double the length, but that's not how it works. What they do with simultaneous interpretation is they have a little headset and they go to the back of the room and they put a fan in front of their face. And I'll tell you why in a minute. And then everyone who wants to hear the other language, they put in that headset. And then it's the same amount of time. It's simultaneous. It is not extra length of presentation at all. And they put the fan in front of their face because you look at who is speaking. And so they do that to make it more seamless in the interaction. It is truly incredible to watch them work. I have worked a lot with Community Language Co-op. They have all of the supplies, all of the different translation pieces, and they also do some language justice training as well. And so Community Language Co-op, and I know there's other ones who do this, but they are a kind of an independent contractor, and they do, I can't even say how many languages, a lot of languages. But they are up and down all over Colorado, and so you just contract with them, and then they connect you with the best person closer to you. If it's in person or virtually, then it doesn't matter. So when thinking about how to incorporate more language justice, and language justice is the ability to communicate and listen in the language that we feel most comfortable. And so there's a couple of different pieces. One thing you can do is translate your existing educational materials. And the way that can be like, oh my gosh, you know, we have so many materials. At the Colorado Water Center, we have so many materials, right? So start thinking about what were your most recent ones and then work backwards. Okay, so which ones are the most impactful and to the community or the most up-to-date resources that you really want to share, and start there. Next are offering bilingual or multilingual classes. So if you do any sort of education or community meeting where you're going to be sharing information with the community, look into having that where you can do translation and interpretation. If you have any sort of classes or certifications, look into translating those so that more people can benefit from them. Website. So our websites, you know, has anyone used Google Translate? Mm-hmm. Excellent. Have you gone to a website in another language and used Google Translate? What was your experience?
So it's more so the interplay between Spanish and English, and then the retranslation, and from some speakers I've heard it's really janky.
Mm-hmm.
So taking it from one to the other is even jankier.
Yes, so I was having a conversation, I think it was last year in the same class, where someone, one of the Water Literate Leaders was saying that they were at a conference in France, and that they were interested, no, it wasn't France, it was Canada, but it was in French. The website was in French, and that they went to learn more, and they hit the Google Translate button, and it was so far from understandable in English, you know, that she said what she felt was not welcome in that organization. And that was such a great, I think, perspective, because it's hard for us if we speak English and our website's in English, and we're like, well, why would we exclude people? But to get that perspective on the other side to say, how are people who don't speak English viewing our organization? So Google Translate is not my favorite. There are those buttons that you can put on your website, and it's like, oh, translate this page to, etc. But even if you have that, if you have any sort of documents as a part of your webpage, those won't get translated. It's just what's on the website. So if you're like, oh, go to this great resource, it'll only be in English. So what I recommend instead is to have a Spanish webpage. So even if you're just getting started and you're just starting to translate a couple of items, just having that Spanish page and putting them there, and then having the opportunity for people to be like, you know, oh, I really wish this was in Spanish. But that form has to be in English and Spanish, you know, so it takes a change of mindset to have all of our information available in other languages, and it takes longer because you need to do, this is here, yeah, any sort of marketing materials, your registration form, your emails, your presentation slides, all of these will need to be translated, and so you have to back off your time for how long it normally takes you to organize this and add that extra buffer in. So as you're doing this, there is that learning curve, I would say. I've gone through that learning curve, helped others go through that learning curve. But once you kind of get into the rhythm of it, then that new process is much more inclusive, and you're able to kind of move forward from there. I created a how-to tips sheet, which I will ask to be shared with you all. It's really a step-by-step if you're going to do bilingual or multilingual events virtually, how to do that. Because again, I learned all the things because I did them all wrong. And then now I know, and I can spare you all that pain by giving you kind of what I have learned through that process. So the Zoom platform is the one that I use. I know there's other platforms, but I've had really good success with Zoom. They have an interpretation button. If you have a certain Zoom platform or a certain Zoom, I don't know what it's called, not the platform, like an account. Yeah, a lot of times interpretation is included with it, but you can't see it. It's like a toggle button. And so see if you already have that, which is a potential that you already do. And then be sure to set up your contract with your translation and interpretation services right away to make sure that they're scheduled on time and that you know when they need the presentation information from you to be able to translate it before your event. Practice session, so vital because you can learn more about how the presenter wants to be interacted with. So sometimes they really want the closed caption on, so that when you're talking in English or whatever language, they can see it and then they can translate it, and other people, it doesn't matter. So again, it's a kind of personal preference with interpreters. And then bilingual slides. I will just highlight this because in some cases, what I have seen happen is that there is an interpreter in a different room and you're talking and they're interpreting, but the slides that everyone is seeing are only in English. And you know, how many of us are only auditory learners? I'm not, you know? And so having that visual of that translated information is so important, not only for their learning, but also to show like, you know, we recognize that this is also to you. It's not like an afterthought of, oh, and there's interpretation, but you can't be included in the full experience. And so I think how we are engaging with the community, how we're building trust, I think this is all a part of that to show that it's not just something we're just now thinking about or something that we're doing because we have to. It's something we're doing because we're truly trying to engage with the community. And then something that Zoom thankfully now has is that you can record in multiple languages. It's tricky, but you can do it. And I tell you how in kind of that tip sheet. But you can record in the English room and record in the Spanish room and then put those up on your website. Diverse water workforce. So we have a workforce that is aging in the water field. You know, we have a grand exodus that will be happening of people who have been in water for a really long time, decades. And so we need to have a water workforce that looks like our communities, that we have different perspectives and backgrounds to solve kind of our next water issues. You know, water issues, we had people who are working on securing our water, you know, 50, 100 years ago. It's such a long time ago. And planning happens so far in the future. And now we need to look forward and see what will those problems be. And we need new tools in our tool belt to be able to solve those problems. And that means having different people with different perspectives in the room to address those. So how we're addressing this is we have the Water Fellows Program. The Water Fellows Program is a program for students, and it is looking at training the next generation of water leaders by connecting undergraduate and graduate students from historically underserved or marginalized communities or identities, and connecting them with careers and opportunities in the water field. So the students who participate, it's a year-long program. They receive a $1,000 stipend for the academic year to participate. And then we have monthly meetings on a variety of water topics: water law, water quality, agriculture, water equity, etc. And the goal there, like there's so many career opportunities in water. Like that's what I love about water. I love so much about water, but you can never get bored doing water, you know, because if you don't like that, then you can switch and do something else. And so really showing students that even if you think, you know, maybe they only think that water is only like wastewater, and like, okay, well now there's ag, well now there's horticulture, like everything touches water. And then they're participating in water conferences for free. So getting that understanding of what's really the topics that are really important right now in water, and having that connection and also those opportunities to network with other community leaders in water. New this year are summer internships. And so we're trying to connect students to real world skills that they can then be prepared to enter the water workforce. And so we are currently looking for internships, and I'll go into that more in a moment. And then getting connected with people, just talking to people, just hearing from water experts, and then you never know kind of what that'll spark. So for example, right here, the students went to Water in the West. Has anyone been to Water in the West? You need to do a better job marketing Water in the West. So Spur, the Spur campus in Denver, they have this annual conference called Water in the West. And it's been going for multiple years, and I was saying we as CSU need to do a better job marketing that particular event. But took some students down to Water in the West, and they had an opportunity to meet the Secretary of Agriculture there. They had like a one-on-one with him, which was really amazing. Bless you. And then during lunch, they were all just kind of approached to do this podcast. And so the podcast was asking them, like, what are they excited about in water? What are their hopes? And none of them were prepped. It was like, hey, you four, come over here and do this thing. And the answers that they gave were phenomenal. And it really it was very inspiring to me about how we need to listen more. We need to listen to students. We need to listen to what excites them and be able to connect them to really be a part of that solution. I think, for some of us who have been in the water field a long time, we've been a part of the contentious pieces, and it can leave us a little bit pessimistic sometimes, and hearing their perspective and how they want to be part of the solution is really reinvigorating, for sure. We have two different cohorts happening right now. One is at Colorado State University. Last year, we had 8 students participating in our Water Fellows program, and this year we have 20, which is just so exciting. We had 30 applications, and I went to our supervisor, John Tracy, and I said, I need more funding because these students are so incredible. And so he said, great, let's do 20, which was phenomenal. I mean, to go from, I had funding for 12. So the Water Center is really stepping up to show how important it is to connect students to these opportunities. Not only do we have 20 students, we have 15 different majors, which I just love. We have people in civil engineering, we have people in sociology and social sciences, we have family and consumer science, soil science. There were some majors that I was like, how is this even connected to water, But then they tell me their story, and again, water impacts everything. And historically, really, the majors that have been most valued have been the hard science, civil engineering, the technical skills. But there's a lot of value to bring in these other perspectives and that new way that people are looking at water. For the first time this year, we also included graduate students. And so we have this diversity of backgrounds. We have international students. We have students from all over the United States. And then we have first year all the way through PhD. So a really great intersection of students to be able to learn from each other. We also received funding from Spur to be able to launch a Denver Water Fellows program. So we're partnering with Metro State University, their One World, One Water Center, and we have 4 students from Metro State and 1 from CU Denver. And we have 4 majors and 5 students there, and also 1 master's, and then the rest are undergraduate. So ways that you can get involved, we are looking for experts, water experts, to come and talk to our students and excite them about the water field. So you can apply to be a guest speaker at one of our monthly meetings. You can give an internship opportunity. You can submit your summer internship. The form isn't there. So if you go to our website and look right this second, the form isn't up there, but there will be a form to enter the information for the summer internships. And then we will be putting a list together for all of our students to then be able to choose which ones they will be applying for. You can also sponsor students through this program, and all of those links can be found on our website. Inclusion. So talking more quickly now about our outlook and really thinking about how we are wording things and out in the community. So for example, I don't want to make Spanish materials because, or we don't want to invest in Spanish materials because they're not being used. To reframing that to, we are not adequately reaching Spanish speakers. So it puts the onus on us instead of, well, they don't want it. Another term that you see a lot in grants is disadvantaged communities. And really switching that, and disadvantaged communities to me says, well, they are disadvantaged and we can't do anything about it. Underserved to me means more, we are underserving them. Again, putting that responsibility on us rather than that's just the way it is and we can't do anything about it. When in your own organizations, look at what's existing, what's working well, where can improvements be made? Are there opportunities to increase staff knowledge about why this is important? And then looking at who's at the table with us and who is left out and how can we invite them to participate with us. And then finally, sit with the discomfort. You know, these conversations are uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable to change the way that we've done things before. You know, it's that inertia of like, well, it's worked in the past, why would we change it? But you know, when I think about if we were all to stay in the same job our entire lives or not switch anything around or have different responsibilities, then we wouldn't be growing and learning as we go on. So the discomfort means that we're doing a good job and we're expanding our own knowledge and opportunities. So as you move forth, learning, there's a lot to learn in this space. I have a lot to learn, and being open to that, being open to hearing those new perspectives. And when you listen, be authentic. You know, people can tell when you're not authentic and when you're just trying to check that box. And so really listen to understand. Working with community connectors, some questions that I get a lot are how do we reach those other communities and build that trust? Because really, as I think all of you who work in government are probably aware, there is distrust between some communities and government organizations. And so how do you bridge that gap? You know, how do you make those connections? And working with community connectors is the way to do it. So working with nonprofits who are working within these communities that you or populations that you'd like to work with, connect with them. And then by working with them, you can start asking, how can we help you? So when we go into communities, sometimes we say, here's the problem we've seen in the community, instead of asking, what do you see that's a problem? And then responding there. So kind of reversing that as well and being open to maybe the community has identified a completely different issue than the one that you thought was what they had the top of their mind. Diverse groups, if you have your municipality and you have a grant program, the difference between a rebate and a grant, there was another person that I was listening to, another presentation, talking about how the low-income communities in Tucson were not engaging in water grant programs. And that's because when you have a grant, or sorry, not the grants, the rebate, they weren't engaging in the rebate programs because to get a rebate, you have to buy the thing first and then wait to get reimbursed. And you have to have the flexibility in your income to do that. And so they weren't engaging. And so what they did was they switched to a grant program where they got the full funding up ahead of time to be able to buy the toilet or whatever it was. And that was much more successful in the low income neighborhoods. So just thinking through some ways to make it more of an opportunity for others to participate in your programs. And then removing as many barriers to engagement as possible. So have in-person meetings, also virtual meetings, provide childcare and food and if possible incentives to participate. If we're asking the community to weigh in on an issue, we're asking them for their expertise. And as water professionals, we want our expertise to be valued and we're paid to give our expertise. We also need to financially compensate or compensate in another way the community who we're asking to give their expertise as well. And then just know that you will make mistakes and we just need to learn from them and improve and just go in with kind of that I want to learn mentality and then be open to feedback and suggestions, which is hard. It's really hard for people to tell us that we're not getting it right, but kind of having that mindset really helps to build that trust. I'm going to, these are different bullets and you will have access to these slides, but these came from the Environmental Justice Task Force recommendations, best practice for community engagement. So the Environmental Justice Task Force met for 1 year. And based on that 1 year of all of these different, 20 different people coming together, they created this best practice guide. So again, that's linked, and these are different things for government organizations, but also can be applied to nonprofits or other organizations on how to do your engagement. I'm gonna kind of skip through my examples to get to the end here. I will just say a couple things on these. When I was working in a different department in CSU, I was leading a program on a stormwater education series, and I worked a lot with Lauren. And so we were doing this bilingual program. And through this program, we had a total of 471 people engaged in these 3 different classes, okay? And then so out of those 471, we had 394 English and 77 Spanish. And then this is the breakdown of what percentage of people came to each class. So if you look at it this way, you would say, okay, well, it looks like the most popular class was the extended detention basic class. We should offer more of those. So I broke this down by topic and then by English and Spanish. And so the English viewers did prefer the extended detention basic class. The Spanish viewers prefer the rain garden. So it's really important not to just take this holistic view and say everyone wants this. You have to have this more nuanced perspective because you're missing the detail if you just kind of lump it all together. And then, you know, these numbers kind of relative to our totals of engagement are really small, but from my perspective, 141 people and 183 people who previously wouldn't have been able to engage with the content could. So in my mind, that is a win. And this is just the beginning. And once we can show the community that we are going to be investing and having these opportunities more available, then more and more people will come to the programs. Some tips to get started. If your organization provides water education, just think about what languages are we currently offering it in and how could this potentially be expanded. If you're on a board, commission, or public office, think about what perspectives are included and which ones are missing. And then if you have open seats, sharing those outside of your network, because usually we just share them with people that we know, who could potentially think like us and have the same background as us. So really expanding out who is being included in those potential opportunities. Staff I already mentioned, and then if you're a funding agency, if you provide grants, how can you have so much power as a funder, you know? How can you alter some of your grant language to make sure that projects that are happening in your area are more inclusive? And so those are small changes that you can make, and you can start gathering data and metrics based on how these are being more inclusive. Here is my list of resources for you. I did also bring this resource with me. It's from the U.S. Water Alliance. As a part of this, because I think it can be overwhelming to say, well, I don't know how to get started. What they do in this toolkit is they have, here we go. They have this phase 0 to phase 3 plan where they take you through questions to see where are you currently, and then suggestions for how do you move forward. So I'll pass that around. And those are these 4 different areas. And so all of these areas might not apply to you and your organization directly, but I think there are enough of the questions to really get you thinking even about, oh, I didn't even know that was an area that we needed to work on. And by scoring yourself, you can really bring that to the rest of your group, your staff, your leadership to talk about, you know, what ways can we improve moving forward. I'm gonna stop. I had these questions to discuss, but I know that I'm over, so I'll just open it up for if you have any questions for me. And then I have my contact information where we can meet to discuss them more in depth as you kind of go forth.
So the summer is the first summer for internships?
Yes.
I guess what's the process besides just filling out the form?
Yeah,
on the website?
the form information we're looking for is really just what the student needs you to apply. And then a link to that application, like what is the internship? How long is it paid or not? How much? You know, just those information so that we can show the students all of their possibilities. We're not trying to do like direct placements for students. We're just trying to show them, you have a summer. Here are different ways that you can get that work experience. Yeah, so that's really the process. And then once we have students who are interested in that internship, then we would help them maybe write their cover letter or get their application materials together. And then, you know, coach them potentially have like interviews, you know, that sort of a thing. And then they would go on to apply and kind of up to them.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yes.
Great presentation. I took some good notes and yeah, I'll probably touch base with you about some things I want to implement with the city. Specifically, I'm reviewing our website right now.
Excellent.
So it's a great opportunity to kind of incorporate that. But curious about the Water Fellows program. How frequently do y'all meet together? Is it just like every month or so, just to kind of touch base with everybody?
Yeah, it's monthly.
Nice.
Our next meeting is coming up in January, and we're talking about water quality. Yeah, so I would love to have the stormwater perspective, definitely. So, yeah, if you're interested in presenting, that would be great.
Absolutely.
Questions? And what do you talk about in that Water Fellows program? I mean, is it similar to what we discussed here, or?
There might be some overlap, you know, but this is really an introduction for the students because some of the students, we went on a field trip with the city of Fort Collins, which was fantastic. And some of the students hadn't even been to the river. And so to talk about water is one thing, to go get education on the river is a totally different thing. We have PhD students who have been studying, you know, civil engineering. We have other students who don't know what a watershed is. So it's a wide range. And we're really trying to just bring people and leverage the skills of the students and the knowledge of the students who are already there and give them opportunities to also share what they're working on, while also just trying to introduce them to the topic of water and all the different facets. I mean, it's only 1 year, so we can't do all the facets, but as many as possible.
And back to the internship question, sorry.
No, I'm excited.
Are you able, or can we work with you to develop an internship that would best feed the needs of your students?
Yes. Who are you with?
Big Thompson Watershed Coalition?
Yeah, I would love that. That would be great. Yes, let's talk.
Okay.
Lots of opportunities.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all so much.
Thank you, Jessica, appreciate it. And I just have a few short announcements before we head out. So firstly, I don't know if anyone has seen the Water Now Alliance. How many people are familiar with that organization? Okay, a few. They have a project accelerator program, and it's for communities, nonprofit groups, basically folks who want to do any sort of water-related project, and they help with things like if you wanted to apply to a Water Smart grant, if you wanted to, you know, build a collaboration or try and get funding for whatever project, they can help provide support in terms of grant writing. They can bring your team together. They provide all kinds of support for free if you apply and you are selected for this accelerator program. It's amazing. It is amazing. The deadline to apply ends February 2nd. I'll send that in a follow-up email too, so you have the link to that program. The Poudre River Forum is coming up on March 1st. That is a really great place. Even if you have attended one of your water talks this year, like it's local. The theme this year is the cost of water. So that's been a big part of our conversation so far. So if you're interested in that, I think it's in Greeley. It's at the Ames Center. The cost of registration is pretty low. It's a one-day thing. Great networking opportunity as well for this region. I can send a link to that as well. Again, Colorado Water Congress is January 31st through February 2nd. That one is a pricey endeavor. Probably not gonna get too many of you there, but just wanna put that out there. It's water buffalo gathering, generally speaking, although, Jessica and actually Emily Hunt, they're working to help try and bring more diversity, bring students into the conversations, get a little mix up in the water buffalo community. And then the farm show is happening in Greeley, January 23rd. That will have some water conversations there as well. So just want to put those out there. Again, a reminder, please do your homework. We've been lacking quite a few submissions every month. So that is part of the requirement of the class. I know it's just another thing you have to tack on all of your stuff, but it really helps that conversation. It helps me understand what issues you all are most interested in and how to then also guide future classes. So please give me that feedback. I appreciate it. And I think that's it. Any questions or?
Just so everyone knows, the farm show is free entry and it's multiple days. And
Yep. It's multiple days?
It's multiple days.
Okay.
It's like 3 days.
Oh.
And it's.
I'm speaking on the 23rd, sorry.
They have different speakers each day, and the only fee that's there is for parking. So, and I think it's like $5 or something. So that's a good one to go to if there are any water type of speakers on the docket.
Definitely.
I do want to note, I don't know if anyone else in here has kids at PSD, but I think our March is over CSU and PSD spring break, our March session,
Oh, is it?
which I just noticed the other day.
We'll take a look at that. Is that generally a problem for people?
Well, I thought you probably know, but some maybe. Very potentially might not be here.
Okay, good to know.
And I don't know what the Well County schools or the private schools are.
We'll be on spring break at some point on Wednesday, but I don't know if it goes over, yeah.
I don't get spring break stuff.
I didn't either until I had kids, so you'll have one in a few years.
Thanks, everybody, appreciate it, we'll see you next month.
Thank you.
Leave your name tags.
Yep.
Sure.
I'm gonna look at that. I don't know where these breaks ever are. I'm so bad. I did that. This happened last year too. There was like 1 month, I don't remember if it was Fall or Spring or something, but there was a month where it was like the meeting's over break and I was like, okay, I didn't know this until now. I just like, I'll look at the date real quick just so we know. March 13th. That's so raisin. I guess, I haven't. Yeah, it's only if they, I know they use their fake days for week typically, I guess.
I realized I had a dead worms in my bag. And they got.
Well, once we find out if it is.
Yeah, spring recess begins March 9th to March 18th. So yeah, I mean, it would be right in the middle, yeah, it'd be 13th in the middle there. Ideal.
There's always something.
Yeah, right?
Benton wants more, is there a better place to put this than in the pile? I feel bad.
No, you can leave it. I throw it in a sack and, yeah, I just throw it in a sack, don't worry. It'll all be in the same place in the end.